Hey, Mama. It is the 1 year anniversary of the Mama Turned Mompreneur podcast. Oh my gosh. I can't believe I've been doing this podcasting thing for 1 year. So in this episode, I'm just going to kind of reflect on the last year of podcasting, share some of the things that I've learned, the wins that I've experienced both in business and life with this podcast. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing today. It's another unscripted, not really outlined episode. But I just kind of wanted to, one, honor this moment, honor this occasion, because 1 year of podcasting is a big deal. But also, too, just for myself to kind of take some time to reflect on my podcasting journey. So let's get into today's episode. Hey, Mama. Welcome to the Mama Turned Mompreneur podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Singletary, a wife, mama of two, and former virtual assistant turned podcast strategist and producer. This is the podcast for the mama who is burnt out trying to build her business on social media. You're tired of putting in so much time and energy marketing your business on social media, only to hear crickets and barely get any engagement on your posts. You don't have time to waste as a busy mama, and you need an effective way to generate leads for your business. Well, Mama, you're in the right place. On this podcast, I will be giving you the inside scoop on how to create a podcast that generates consistent leads for your business on autopilot, mixed in with some mompreneur hacks and tips for growing your business as a busy mama. So grab your coffee, your notebook and pen, put in those earbuds, and let's dive in. All right, we are celebrating the 1 year podcast-versary of the Mama Turned Mompreneur podcast. I cannot believe I've been doing this podcasting thing for 1 year. I still remember sitting in my mom's office and recording the trailer, the intro, the outro, mapping out my launch episodes. It feels like so long ago, but it's only been a year, which is just so wild to me. And this podcast, if you guys have been tuning in since day one, it has changed, it has grown, it has become far bigger than I ever imagined, in the sense of like how pivotal it's been in my business and just the connections it's allowed me to make and everything. And so kind of just starting with where I started and where I am today with this podcast. So let's talk about confidence. So when I started this podcast, I thought I was confident podcasting, but in reality, it was a false sense of confidence. I really thought hard about the type of content I was creating and questioned every little thing. And with time, I really found my voice. I really found my style of podcasting, and I really learned my audience and what you guys want from me. And I feel like that transition, it really reflects, like if you go back to maybe an episode I did back in January and compare it to like June, July episodes, you can see that progression, you can see that growth and everything, and how I really have learned to kind of like walk in it, own it. And this is not to sound like cocky or like I have a big head or anything like that. Like, I really learned how to be comfortable behind this microphone and share my heart, share my thoughts, and really give you guys value in my podcast content. And so that confidence, like it's a beautiful thing. Like, I really love creating content in this format. It feels so good to me. In a lot of ways, it's therapeutic for me. It's just, I love it. Like, I love using my voice this way. And then as far as like the type of content I create, that has reached a whole new level too. Again, going back to those earlier episodes where I really shied away talking about different things related to podcasting. And now I'm owning it. I'm talking about it. I'm sharing how you really can use your podcast as an effective marketing tool, as an effective way to generate leads for your business as a busy mama. And I love it. Now, does everybody agree with me? No, but hey, we can agree to disagree. But I've seen for myself, I've seen for my clients and other people I know who are in the podcasting space. And this is an effective strategy for us. You know, we've really been able to build our business. And even when we don't show up on social media or different things, we're still generating new leads. We're still, growing our podcast audience. I recently had Kylie Kelly tag me in an Instagram story where someone found out about her Spotlight Club through her podcast episode, in which I interviewed her on my podcast. And I love that I've been able to use my podcast, not just to help my business, but other women I've connected with, like helping them grow their business. Like that feels so good to me. And it's like, I love to see it because like the message says, she's like, yeah, I found you on the Mama Turned Mompreneur podcast. I'm just like, oh my gosh, that's my podcast. It's like, I know that's so silly, but it feels so good, just knowing that not only am I growing my business through this podcast, but I'm helping other women get connected and grow their business through this podcast. And it just lights me up. Like, this podcast is not about me or just about me building my business. Like, I love supporting other women who are doing amazing things, and the world needs to hear about it. And being able to highlight these women on my podcast is just incredible. And so, speaking of interviews, you guys have to, like, if you've been listening since the beginning, you see the progression in how I conduct interviews. And I want to share that, like, promise you, go back and listen to the first interview I did and compare it to like one of the recent ones. And you see that progression. You see that growth, how I'm more confident in running these interviews and asking questions and sharing my own expertise and whatnot. And I share all that to say is like, podcasting is a skill that you have to develop over time. And I say this jokingly, but your first episodes compared to like when you reach, episode 80, 90 or whatever, those first episodes are going to suck in comparison to that. And it's not a bad thing. You grow, you learn, you make improvements, you make changes. The thing is that you just have to get started. If you don't ever get episode 1 out, you're never going to reach 100 where you are really owning it, walking in that confidence, really using your voice to make an impact and whatnot. But you have to get started first. So yes, the first episodes aren't going to be the best, but you're not going to stay there as long as you continue and you learn and you grow and you implement the things that you're learning. Okay, so let's get into some of like, I guess I'm going to call them like the main takeaways that I've, had this first year of podcasting. So I really learned the importance of creating content geared towards your target audience, your ideal listener, your ideal client. And I learned this in that before I was putting out the content that, one, I thought my audience wanted, but also kind of felt safe to me. At that time when I first launched this podcast, I was still fairly new to podcasting. Like I had launched, I guess I want to say like 2 podcasts. So one other and then my own. And I also had only managed a couple of podcasts. And so I still felt fairly new. And so I held back on a lot of things. I tried to stay safe. And the thing is that that wasn't helping my audience. They wanted to know what was unique about me. They wanted to know my actual thoughts on podcasting and podcasting as a mom. And so until I started, shying away from those safe things and really sharing my thoughts and feelings and, what I've seen in the podcasting space, I really wasn't growing. I really wasn't able to effectively use my podcast as part of my marketing strategy, as part of my lead generation. So I really started to grow in that area. And related to that, I learned how to show up authentically and be transparent. And it can be hard doing that, but I think it's important in the podcasting space. So much of the content we see, especially on social media, it's the highlight reels. It's, the perfect moments and everything. And let's be honest, that's not real life. It's not. Things are always going to happen. Things are going to go wrong. Nothing is ever going to be perfect because we live in an imperfect world. So I've really leaned into being authentic and being transparent. Now, if you listen to my episode last week, I got raw, real, and vulnerable with you guys about the struggles I've been having. I even cried a little bit in the episode. I did forewarn you in the intro, but I feel like that is important because I don't want you guys to think that it's always rainbows, sunshines, and daisies over here because it's not. I have struggles just like you. I am a mama just like you and feel all the things and deal with all of the things just like you. And it's important that you guys know that because why would you want to work with me if everything is always perfect? You guys are going to think that I can't relate, that I don't fully understand. And if I can't relate, if I can't empathize, then how can I actually help you? So I learned that that is really important in your podcast content. Now, I'm not saying going to tell like every little detail of your business and whatnot. You don't have to air your dirty laundry or anything like that. But share those real moments that your listeners need to hear, that they can really connect with and get a deeper understanding of who you are. So, yeah, that was another takeaway. Another takeaway I had was downloads don't really mean much. And I say that in a way, in like, not to completely discredit downloads, but they don't mean everything in the sense when you're podcasting for your business. The real indicator when you're podcasting for your business, so like the real indicator of success is like, one, looking at how much of your episodes people are consuming. Looking at those types of metrics, but also two, are you actually generating leads from your podcast? Meaning that people aren't just stopping at your podcast, they're moving down your funnel. That's like more important than your downloads because you can have 1 million downloads and not generate a single lead from your podcast. Now, I've shared about it on the podcast before about a client I work with who, when we started working together, she had 250K downloads and hadn't, generated a single lead from her podcast. So it's not about downloads. And I know people tend to focus on downloads in the podcasting space. And it's important, like if you are trying to pursue sponsorships and, maybe you're an influencer with a podcast, but when you're podcasting for your business, you're a service provider, you're a coach, don't get caught up on the downloads. Look at, are people converting from your podcast? Are people moving down your funnel? Meaning, are they getting on your email list? Are they following you on Instagram and you guys are having conversations in the DMs? Are they opting into your lower ticket offers? So look at that. Are they opting into your high ticket offers? You want to look at that. That is much more telling than the number of downloads you have. Okay, podcasting is great for initiating collaborations. This has been huge in my business. I did not fully understand the importance of collaborations and networking until I started my podcast. Now, before I started my podcast, and even early on in my podcasting journey, I was trying to be at all of the networking calls. And I promise you, each of the networking calls I showed up to, they were such a major disappointment. A lot of them highlighted like, oh yeah, this is for mompreneurs and stuff. And most of them were women who weren't in the same season of life as me. They didn't have little ones. All of their kids were older, or they didn't have kids at all. And I'm like, well, why are you promoting it to mom business owners? It was so frustrating. And so I stopped going to these networking calls because I was disappointed each time. And so that's when I was like, you know what? I can use my podcast as a way of networking. And I became very intentional about the types of guests I had on my podcast. And I have connected with so many amazing women through this podcast. And I loved it because I think I've shared this with you guys. I am an introvert, so I do better one-on-one versus like a large group setting. And so these one-on-one interviews will often lead to conversations either before the interview starts or after the interview is over, and building these incredible relationships. So, for instance, Kylie Kelly, I had been listening to her podcast for the longest, and I decided to reach out to her, like to apply to be a guest on her podcast. And I said, I would also love for you to be a guest on my podcast. We can do a swap. We did that, and I ended up joining her membership, the Spotlight Club. She ended up working with me in one of my power hour sessions for planning podcast content. And now I'm in her email empire membership. But more than that, I've really grown to know her as a person. And she is one of the most incredible human beings I've come to know. And I wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for the podcast, if we hadn't have had that one-on-one interaction. And not just with her. Kay Hellman, you guys know I talk about Kay all the time. Love her to death. We connected, like I joined her, it's now the oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name of her program? It's now called, her program's now called the Moms Do Business Differently. And so I joined her program, but we ended up doing a podcast swap too. And even after that, like we're still really connected. We still like, she's so funny. She sends me reels that's like related to mom life. And I'm like, yes, that is my life. But I just absolutely love her. But again, through like doing that podcast swap, we were able to get to know each other better, and we continue to build that relationship. And she now, like, I've gotten clients because of her. Like, she refers people to me, and I refer people to her and everything. Like, I see her as being the go-to marketing and sales coach for mom business owners because she gets it. She's a mom with two littles in the thick of it and has built two incredibly successful businesses. So I share all that to say it's like I've really been able to build some incredible relationships through my podcast. For many of my guests, I've become their go-to people for podcasting, and they've become my go-to people for whatever their niche is. And some of them have gone on to become my clients. For some of them, I've gone on to become their clients because I've really been able to get to know them, and they've been able to get to know me. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the person I want to work with for this. And some of them, I have them on my budget list for 2024 for people who I want to, outsource different things to or invest in. But it's because of these interviews that we've been able to build these connections and really get to know each other. Okay, so the next thing you can really build an incredible community through your podcast. And I know a lot of times people are like, well, it's a one-sided conversation. It doesn't have to be, especially when you have your funnel set up the right way. A lot of these women who tune into my podcast, they either go one of two ways. They either get on my email list or they follow me on Instagram and we have conversations. And I've been able to get to know so many of you guys, and we just relate so much. And it's so incredible because we have that mom connection. But I really get to know you guys on a deeper level, and I love it. But also, too, you guys are so amazing in that I'm finding out you're referring other people to me, like my podcast, like, oh, you need to listen to the Mama Turned Mompreneur podcast. I see you guys tagging me in different posts, like in Facebook groups, like, oh, yeah, Andrea's the podcasting queen. Andrea, this, and like, you guys, like, that means the world to me in that you see my expertise. You see me as the go-to person for podcasting, and you're sharing about it with other people. Like, I value you guys so much. I love you guys so much. You guys are so incredible, and you just warm my heart. Like, it's just, I just always get, I'm just like, oh my gosh, you guys are the best. Or when you send me those messages, like, oh my gosh, I resonated so much with this episode. Or even like the newer people who've come into my podcasting world and share, like, oh yeah, I binged your podcast episodes, like all 99 or however many in a weekend. I'm like, you guys, like, you know how to make this mama feel good. So I love you guys. But like, I'm just saying, like, you really can build an incredible community through your podcast. And I know people have different views on that, but it really is about making sure you have that funnel set up. So that way you can have those one-on-one conversations so that it's not just one-sided. So yeah, that was like one of the big takeaways for me. Now let's get into like focusing on how like my podcast has impacted my life as well as business. So this one kind of falls into both life and business, but it's really simplified my content creation in that I am able to not spend so much time creating content. I remember when I would be spending hours recording and editing reels and creating, not promo graphics, but creating graphics for like a carousel and different things like that. And it was just so draining. It took up so much time. But yeah, content creation used to take up so much time for me. And it was just exhausting. And I would spend so much time like trying to create stuff for Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or whatever, that I wouldn't have the energy to focus on other things. And so really honing in on my podcast content and then repurposing it for other platforms, which it's mostly just like for email. And, I will create stories around these podcast episodes or pull out like a main point from a podcast episode and do like a quick little training on it in stories. But that takes so much less time and it feels good because now I have more time to focus on my family. I'm not feeling the pressure of trying to do this and do that and everything. And not to say like anything against that, if you love creating content for social media, go for it. But for me, I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. It was something I dreaded doing. And so I was like, okay, I got to do something different. So my podcast has really simplified that for me and has given me more time freedom, which I absolutely love. It's also, which I shared about earlier, it's really helped me to find my voice, and it's helped me to build some incredible friendships with other moms. And that has been the biggest struggle since becoming a mom. Now, mind you, I became a mom at the height of the pandemic, so we had social distancing and all of that going on. But it's just been so hard trying to, find other mom friends. And through my podcast, I've really been able to do that. And it's been so nice because you guys get it. Like, you guys care about what's going on with my kids, like how I shared in last week's episode about how my daughter had a seizure and the response from the women in my community. Oh my gosh, it was so overwhelming and in such a beautiful way. Like, and even many of you are following up, asking, how's your daughter doing? How are you doing? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you doing anything for you? And I'm so grateful for that because that has always been my prayers that, like, Lord, send me my village, send me my community, send me those friends, those people who, one, get it, but actually care. And He's done that. Like, you guys are so incredible. And I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. And then, as far as like on the business side of things, I have literally found my most aligned clients for my different offers through this podcast. Now, don't get me wrong, I've landed clients through Instagram, Facebook groups, and different things like that. But the most aligned ones and the ones who I love my clients because I'll like be talking to them about something and they're like, oh yeah, you said that on your podcast episode, the most recent one, or in episode such and such. I'm like, dang, y'all know my podcast better than I do. But I've connected with the most amazing women who've gone on to become my clients through this podcast. And I am so grateful for that. Like, it's truly been a blessing. And I love it. I love it. And also too, like, you guys, the listeners, my community, you tell me what you want from me. You tell me what type of content you want. And I'm so grateful for that because it makes it so much easier. Like, I think I'd shared in my stories, I don't know when, probably a month ago or something, but how I had I think it was like over 50 episode topics, and it came from you guys. So thank you, because you guys are a big part of this podcast. You guys are my motivation to keep showing up each week and everything and creating content that resonates with you, that speaks to you and support you, with where you're at in business and everything. And then it's just in general, like, having this podcast has made running this business a lot easier because, I may take off time from doing Instagram stories. I may not send out an email or, different things like that. But one thing you can count on me is that each week is going to be a new podcast episode. And I don't feel that stress or that pressure to, oh, I got to create content. I know my podcast is still working for me even when I don't show up. And so that has been a game changer in all of this. So those are my takeaways from my first year of podcasting. And just like I said, just kind of sharing with you guys where I started and where I'm at now with my podcast and how I create content and everything. And it's been such an incredible journey. I'm not stopping or planning to stop anytime soon. I have so much more content planned for you guys. And especially as I lean more into the coaching side of my business, you guys are going to see a wider variety of content here. Now, yes, we're still going to be talking about podcasting because podcasting is what I do. But it's not the only way that I can support you guys. I can support you guys with, building a sustainable business in your current season of life, figuring out time management and the back end of your business and different things, and really just creating a business that meets you where you're at, meets your needs and everything. Because a lot of times we start these businesses and they can start to run our lives. And that's not what we want. That's not what we do here at Mama Turned Mompreneur. We build a business that fits our current season of life, that fits our needs and our family's needs. We are not going to sacrifice ourselves. We're not going to sacrifice motherhood. We're not going to sacrifice our family. None of that here. But we still can have a successful business. And so I can support you with that. You guys are going to see more content around that. So be on the lookout for that. And I'm going to wrap this up because we are going over the 30-minute mark and I'm trying to be mindful of that. So I will catch you in the next episode. Mama, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to hang with me. Whether you're a podcaster ready to create podcast content that attracts her dream clients, or a mama that's ready to stop the social media burnout and simplify her marketing through podcasting, I can support you. Head on over to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/connect to submit an interest form so we can chat about how I can best support you. All right, Mama, I will talk to you again soon.